This is a special edition of Channel 3 Eyewitness News. Gulf Showdown, the home front.
Now, the 28 countries with forces in the Gulf area have exhausted all reasonable efforts to reach a peaceful resolution, have no choice but to drive Saddam from Kuwait by force. We will not fail.
Good evening. President Bush tonight orders American and allied forces into war with Iraq. The massive aerial bombardment by U.S., British, Kuwaiti, and Saudi planes was met with little resistance. The president expressing hope that Operation Desert Storm will end quickly with a minimum of casualties. Channel 3's Tom Walker has late details from Washington.
5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
With that, the president announced that he was taking the nation to war against Iraq. He outlined the extent and purpose of the series of military strikes, which he said were being carried out against military positions inside Iraq and Kuwait.
We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed. Our operations are designed to best protect the lives of all the coalition forces by targeting Saddam's vast military arsenal.
The president said, "We will not fail," adding that the Allied forces would drive Iraqi troops out of Kuwait. As the president spoke, about 100 anti-war protesters kept a vigil outside the White House. And on Capitol Hill, legislators watched along with the rest of the country and, like the president, hoped for a quick end to the fighting.
I am hopeful, as the president indicated, that this will be swift, it will be successful, and we will see the minimum of casualties possible.
All we can do is hope that it ends quickly and that Saddam Hussein pulls out of Kuwait. It possibly will end this evening. Maybe he'll get the message now that there's no way out for him in all of this, and we just hope it ends quickly.
President Bush again tonight made the case for this military action, saying all reasonable efforts to settle the issue short of war had failed. He said the world could wait no longer. Even as the conflict began, the White House hoped Saddam Hussein might still be convinced to lay down his arms. Tom Walker, Channel 3 Eyewitness News, Washington.
We have heard tonight from the families of Connecticut reservists called up to serve with Operation Desert Storm. Those reservists are primarily ground forces. Their families tonight following primarily an air campaign so far. Channel 3's Jim Hadley is with them in East Hartford. Jim?
Don, let me tell you just who walked through this door into this living room just a few moments ago. The father of an F-15E fighter pilot. One of the planes that we've been watching all night go up in the air over Baghdad. Bill Polowitzer joins us now. Bill, you've been more upbeat than anybody in this room tonight. Is there a sense of relief on your part?
Yeah, I heard my son got back okay. I heard on the TV that all the planes come back, so it is a relief. We were worried sick for a while there.
Did the timing surprise you?
No, it didn't really. We had to do something, and the longer we waited, the worse it was going to be. So, and that's my own personal opinion.
When you listened to the bombings in Baghdad tonight, knowing that they were coming from fighter planes that your son was piloting, what goes through your mind when you hear all that?
Well, those people they're professional, highly skilled people, and I really wasn't worried at all. My wife was kind of, scared, but being in the service myself, I didn't really know what they're doing.
Have you gotten a sense from him, I guess, that you are confident that he's back on the ground? Do you worry that he'll be going back up, or do you think that they're going to put the ground troops to use for a while now?
I think that they'll go back up and do a few more sorties before they use the ground troops. I don't think the air war is over yet.
And your reaction to the president's speech tonight?
I think the president is a real brave man. He was ready to stand alone if he didn't get the word from Congress and the Senate. And he just threw a challenge down and stuck to it.
Bill, our prayers are with you and your wife tonight. Thank you. The doors here at the Keyes home will remain open throughout the night. Again, as we've mentioned, throughout the night, there have been 34 families coming in and out for support. They meet once a week, usually on Friday nights. Tonight, they began calling each other around 6:45 when word started trickling down that bombs were coming down. Right now, I'm going to throw to my colleague who happens to be at Westover Air Force Base in Chicopee, David Ushery. David?
Jim, of course, we know that with Operation Desert Shield, Westover Air Force Base was responsible for funneling some 24,000 troops over to the Gulf. Now, with Operation Desert Storm under the way, of course, the base's responsibility doesn't change. It just heightens. Just a few moments ago, some 130 members of the 94th Military Police Company out of Manchester, New Hampshire, filed past us, each one taking a step closer to war. They've been training at Fort Devens for the last 5 weeks. They knew that this could happen, and it did happen tonight. Their mood was somber and resolute.
Let's get it done. Let's get it over with. Quick and precise.
This is the situation we find ourselves for, so they're ready to go. Do you think it would actually happen? Oh, yeah. The mood was like on the bus.
Quiet. Quiet. Everybody's kind of thinking, preparing themselves in their own minds, you know.
Okay, they're going to have a little while here to just relax and recreate. Most of them are watching CNN in the lounge area or throwing a football around. They'll be moving out at about 3 o'clock this morning. One other thing to point out, the 337th Military Airlift Squadron, which is based here at Westover, and that is the men and the women who make up the crews of the C-5 cargo plane. They have been going back and forth over to Saudi Arabia, and most of those members are from the New England area. So, of course, concerned tonight about their safety and well-being. We talked to the commander of the squadron, and he says as far as he can tell, has been able to touch base with all of them, and they are safe. Planes are either returning from Europe or Saudi Arabia tonight, so they are safe. So that's a bit of good news right now. Back to you, Don and Denise.
David, I'd like to ask you about their emotional reaction. As you mentioned, they're monitoring live coverage of Operation Desert Storm. They've heard from President Bush, from Defense Secretary Cheney, from their superiors, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Can you share some of their reaction to what they're seeing and watching?
Well, it's interesting to point out, Don, you know, soldiers are soldiers, and even if these were reservists, they've been training now to become active duty soldiers, and I think they've got a mindset now of soldiers so that their display of emotion is very limited. They watch the news, they accept what's happening, of course encouraged by reports that the air raid is going well, but their display of emotion is very limited. They know that they've got a job to do, and they're just ready to go ahead and do it.
All right, thank you. Channel 3's David Ushery reporting live from Westover. Well, it was a divided Connecticut delegation which voted along party lines last weekend on the resolutions authorizing President Bush to use force against Iraq.
Congresswoman Nancy Johnson and her Republican colleagues voted yes on the House resolution. Mrs. Johnson is with us live tonight from our Washington Bureau. Congresswoman, as you know, when a war gets off the ground, there are a lot of variables, a lot of possibilities that things will go wrong. From what we're hearing, very little is going wrong tonight. Your reaction to the air campaign so far?
Well, I'm very pleased that the air campaign precisely reflects the commitment of the UN resolution and the multinational group of nations involved. It is aimed specifically at decapitating Iraq's military capability and urging their withdrawal from Kuwait, and not at the civilians in Iraq, nor at damaging the Iraq nation.
What is your sense of things, Congresswoman? Do you believe, as President Bush hopes, that the war will end quickly?
Of course I do, and I am deeply disappointed that diplomatic efforts fail to resolve this crisis.
Congresswoman, how does all of this change your role as the Congresswoman from the 6th District of the state of Connecticut, representing towns like New Britain and those towns out there? Do you now change more of your emphasis as almost a liaison for the families of Connecticut servicemen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are many things that we do to support families who have young people overseas, many things that we do to help out in crisis. It is a sad and difficult time for us as a nation, for families individually, and for me. But it is time to back our boys and girls, our women overseas, to back our president, and to win this in as narrow a window as possible, as decisively as possible, and achieve just the goals of the UN resolution, goals that the Arab and non-Arab world are in complete agreement upon.
Mrs. Johnson, what do you say to Connecticut families who are spending an awfully anxious night tonight watching this coverage, knowing that their sons and daughters are over in the Persian Gulf? Is there anything reassuring that you can tell them?
Well, my heart goes out to them. Our men and women are extremely well trained, and their performance tonight demonstrate that.
What about this move in the House that we heard about today from a Texas congressman to impeach President Bush? This, of course, is before the warplanes were launched. Is this going to go away?
Absolutely. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Foley, made it very clear that all were united. Those who voted for both resolutions were united on the UN resolution goals.
All right, we thank you. Connecticut Congresswoman Nancy Johnson joining us live from Washington.
Well, this is also an anxious night for other Connecticut families with a personal stake in the war. Ann Harkey of Bristol is the mother of a military policeman in Saudi Arabia. Mrs. Harkey is with us tonight. We'd like to ask you, ma'am, how are you holding up so far?
It's hard. It's not easy.
Now, your son is with a military policeman on station in Saudi Arabia. Presumably, he would anticipate being involved in handling any of Iraqi POWs that might come over in large numbers now, it appears. Have you talked with him about that role he's going to play over there?
Yes, he called last night or this morning about 4 o'clock. And I asked him where he was, and he says, Mom, I can't tell you. And the last time I talked to him was last week. And he told me that he was at a port. He was 10 miles from the border previous to that, and they put him out to the port. And I says, is that any safer? And he says, it's not really any safer, Ma. He says, but we've got to do it. And last night I said to him, I says, Buddy, are you, because we call him Buddy, I says, Buddy, are you still at the port? And he says, Mom, I don't know. I can't tell you. So I have no idea where he is now.
What is your reaction, Mrs. Harkey, to the president's speech? Were you comforted at all by anything he said?
With tonight's speech, yes. I had a lot of mixed reactions up until tonight's speech, but after hearing him tonight, I feel a lot more comfortable with what they're doing. And I feel a lot more comfortable with his decision now.
What advice are you offering to other families tonight who are dealing with their anxiety as they watch this war played out to some extent live on national television?
What advice is, I don't know. Everybody has to go through this in their own way. My friends, my family, everybody's been really sticking by me. There's so many support groups up there. Ties, that binder one. I went to a meeting last night for one, and it really helped a lot. It really did. I'm a mother, and unless you're a mother, you don't know what we're going through. I know what a wife is going through. I've been a wife. I can understand their feelings, but a mother's love for her child over there and not knowing what is happening to them is unbearable, and we can't go through this alone. We can't. And these support groups, I talked to a woman last night. Her name was Faye. I called her on the phone, and she was just so glad to hear somebody else going through the same thing she felt. She said her husband and everybody just doesn't understand how she's feeling. And I told her, I said, well, anytime of night you want to call me, I said, call me, because we have to stick together on this.
Well, it's great to know that there are such groups, and our thoughts and prayers are with you tonight, Mrs. Harkey. Thanks for joining us.
And thank you for being with us during this time.
You're quite welcome.
Well, as we've heard, Defense Secretary Cheney tonight reports the operations appear to be going very, very well. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, says the Allied offensive met no air resistance. Our military specialist, Jeffrey Cole, explains the progress of the campaign so far tonight. Jeff?
Well, John, I'm with Brad Klein, an assistant professor of politics at the University of Hartford. Together, we've been monitoring events and trying to get a look and a handle on just what kind of an operation this was. Apparently, they have achieved total tactical surprise. In fact, the Iraqis didn't know they were coming. Planes F-15Es flew out of Saudi Arabia's central bases and into Iraq and Kuwait, where they bombed. Dick Cheney did have a briefing this evening just after 9 o'clock. Here's what he had to say about tonight's activity.
The targets being struck tonight are located throughout Iraq and Kuwait. Our focus is on the destruction of Saddam Hussein's offensive military capabilities, the very capabilities that he used to seize control of Kuwait and that make him a continuing threat to the nations of the Middle East.
Now, exactly what they were going after tonight were some Scud bases. These are Soviet-developed missiles that they have up here in western Iraq, 2 bases. Why did they want to go after the Scuds, Brad?
The Scuds represent the greatest offensive threat into Israel, and they represent the ability of the Iraqi army to carry the war and the mass destruction into neighboring countries.
Now, it appears that the cruise missile was used for the first time in combat tonight. The cruise is able to read the topography and go after its target. How did they use the cruise tonight from what we know?
Well, the cruise was used to fly in low and to set off the Iraqi anti-aircraft and anti-aircraft batteries, which then were able to be picked off by the fighter planes following behind.
Now, it's important to point out that, as Don reported, it appears that U.S. Fighter pilots did not get any resistance from Iraq pilots in the air, although the Iraqi ground forces apparently did throw anti-aircraft weaponry up into the air, and whether anyone was knocked down, Cheney Powell would not say that in their briefing. What do you think is next after what has been apparently a massive bombardment of Iraq and Kuwait?
Well, I think what's next is that Israel and a number of the other countries can rest assured that it appears for the moment they are safe from an immediate expansion. I think what will happen now is that the United States and the Allies will be able to expand the air war to go after tactical planes on the ground, to go after some of the railway and truck supply lines down to the Kuwait area, and also begin to start striking at ground forces in Kuwait and around Kuwait City.
Exactly, and what has been reported all along about Saddam Hussein's forces is that he has dug in all along the Iraqi border, all along the Kuwaiti border. In fact, when he fought Iran, he fought the same sort of way, dug in, tried to draw the forces into what he called killing zones and fought away. Without resistance from Iraqi air forces, the U.S. ought to be able to, may be able to move freely if they want to attack them.
Well, it's a little difficult. Air alone cannot win the war. If the troops want to stay in there, if they're dug in, they're well provisioned, they can stay for several weeks. This is the beginning of the war. This is not the end.
The B-52 apparently was not used tonight. What's the importance of the B-52? If it is used, how should it be used? How would you expect it to be used?
Well, it has an enormous payload, much larger than the F-15Es. Apparently, it was vulnerable to some of the ground anti-aircraft of the Iraqis. Now that the air has been cleared, it will be used for enormous bombing campaigns into the interior, to the chemical plants, and for supply lines and weapons manufacturing up in the Tigris and Euphrates River.
As we reported earlier, and what the Pentagon confirmed today in a briefing that it had in Saudi Arabia, that two aircraft carriers, the Midway and the Ranger, moved into the Persian Gulf very close to the Iraq Kuwaiti border. It was believed that airstrikes, if they came from the carriers, would come from these vessels. Tonight, it appears that that didn't happen. We don't have confirmation from that, but we do know that the aircraft did, in fact, leave, mostly from Saudi Arabia. Also, 4 carriers came in the Red Sea and were stationed there as well. So it, in fact, has been quite a night. Massive bombing of Iraq and Kuwait, going after command and control. What is command and control inside Iraq?
It's the ability for the forces to communicate with one another, for air to be able to communicate with ground forces, for Baghdad to be able to communicate with artillery forces out in the desert. The phrase is decapitation. What you're doing is you're cutting the head off, figuratively, and this makes it very difficult to pursue the war. It also makes it a little more difficult to negotiate and to enforce a surrender as well.
Is it a surprise, and I imagine it would be considering how long forces have been building up in this region, that the U.S. apparently was able to get tactical surprise the Iraqis that they were coming tonight?
I must say it's astonishing that the Iraqis were so apparently ill-prepared for this attack. And it tells you something that the Saddam Hussein regime may be more of a puppet figure and maybe not quite as strong as we had assumed all along.
Okay, to reiterate what Dick Cheney, the Secretary of Defense, said, he said that Saudi aircraft, U.S. aircraft, U.K. aircraft, and Kuwaiti aircraft all used in this massive attack tonight of Iraq. That's about all from here. Folks, back to you.
All righty, thank you, Jeffrey Cole and our expert, Brad Klein. Well, from around Connecticut, other reaction to tonight's events in the Gulf. Newly elected Connecticut Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro issued a statement. She said, "I am saddened by tonight's news," and added that we must all unite behind our men and women in the Gulf. DeLauro had voted against the congressional resolution authorizing force. And Bishop Daniel Riley of the Diocese of Norwich also said he was saddened by the failure of diplomatic efforts. He called for prayers for a brief conflict. Denise?
It's 7:15 in the Middletown Reserve Center. Word has just reached here that the hostilities have begun. Some look down, others shake their heads.
Throughout the entire process, I've always felt that this is where it was headed. But it's real now. There is a different feeling.
We're curious as professional soldiers as to what the tactical situation is and what's really happening there.
And you're still supportive.
And we're still supportive.
As President Bush addressed the nation, some workers in a Hartford hotel stopped working to watch. Some diners stopped eating to listen in.
My husband and I were talking at dinner saying it's really happening. We are at war, and it's very frightening.
It is through television that people found out what happened and are keeping abreast of what is happening. And at this electronics store in Rocky Hill, customers stood still when they heard what happened.
Everybody just stopped in their tracks and just looked at there's so many TVs that we have here. People were just shocked. We never thought it would come to this.
The actual word of war also shocked people in a Middletown lounge, even though the world has prepared for war for almost 6 months.
I was home and I just broke down and cried. I thought it was really sad, and I'm really sad about it.
The way I feel now is I'm very concerned about our people over there, but we're in it now. Let's get it over with. Let's win it.
Many people stopping to watch feel the same way, at least in hoping that the fighting will end soon. So Don, Denise, what we found tonight was a real sadness that the fighting's actually begun, but support that it's taking place. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you.
Steve, Jarriel.
Well, one thing the pilots had talked about in these days leading up to the invasion, they had talked about wanting a full moon so that they could have a little bit of light when they attacked at night. They didn't get their full moon, but they went in tonight under a new moon.
A new moon, that's right. And Hilton is standing by with more on that. Hilton?
Well, Denise, Don, they went in not only with a new moon, that is virtually no moonlight, but they also went into Iraq with Iraqi skies shrouded with clouds. The minute I heard war had broken out and the hostilities had begun again, I grabbed a satellite picture to document the weather Wednesday, 7 p.m., January 16th, 1991, over the Saudi Peninsula. And you can see that much of the Saudi Peninsula was clear, but skies over Iraq were shrouded with clouds. We'll take a close-up look at that. Baghdad overcast at 7 o'clock tonight. By comparison, Riyadh under partly cloudy to mostly clear skies, and the heavy cloudiness in that part of the world was over Iraq this evening and over parts of the Persian Gulf and over Kuwait and the entire nation of Kuwait shrouded in clouds this evening. Clouds that are unusual, not your typical desert scene where you hear about those clear skies where you can look up and count every star clearly and sharply. There was no bright sky tonight, at least in terms of moonlight or starlight. By comparison, in the northeastern part of the United States, a winter-like storm enveloping us. The storm center is just to our west-southwest now, trying to push warm air into New England. The result has been that rain over New England has moved as far as the Canadian border. There's been some snow, sleet, and freezing rain in northern New England, but for southern New England, this storm that we've named Edie has been a wet one, a rainy one for us. We've had 7/10 of an inch of rain here at Channel 3, and a look at radar shows some showers moving into the southwestern part of the state now. We look for those showers to be ending later tonight. Showers, even some thunder showers reported around the area, should be ending overnight. Partial clearing with fog lifting. Overnight lows will range from 35 to 40. And then a quick look at Thursday, partly cloudy, breezy. A sprinkle or a flurry is possible, and highs in the 40s. Now, why do we say a sprinkle or a flurry is possible on Thursday? Well, the Thursday evening weather map shows that the storm center we showed you that's over us now will have moved completely off the map, but we'll have a little upper air disturbance sweeping across the Great Lakes. It will be bringing in systematically colder air over us, and as that system moves over, there is a chance for a flurry, but we don't look for any heavy snow for tomorrow. There is also the chance for a storm coming this weekend, and we'll be watching that as the weekend approaches. But again, the big story tonight, our weather and the weather in the Middle East. Don, Denise.
All right, thank you, Hilton.
Well, only one team, just comparing notes with Dave, that canceled its game tonight on account of the fighting was North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina State, two schools 15, 20 miles apart. It wasn't a hardship on people if they did indeed cancel it. But the show went on at Syracuse and most other basketball arenas around the country. We can show you how the UConn game came down. They were winning by a point when LaRon Ellis scored to give Syracuse a 69-68 lead. 10 seconds to go. Chris Smith hits that basket. UConn led by 2. Billy Owens down the lane. He missed shot put in by Ellis. It was tied at 71 in overtime. Ellis' shot here would go in, and Syracuse led it by 4, 80-76. Gilad Katz made it an 80-79 game, a free throw 81-79, and then Chris Smith's shot after the buzzer. UConn was beaten by 2 points, a tough loss at Syracuse.
We lost the game because they made the plays at the end, a couple plays at the end, and we didn't. I mean, quite honestly, and that play was just one of the plays. I mean, Gilad comes back and makes a three-pointer right after that.
I just think we just got a bad shot up when we were down by 1 in like 17 seconds. We took out a bad shot. We couldn't get that rebound. We took out a bad shot. Yeah, it was a tough one for us. Unfortunately, we didn't win. We had a lot of effort. We tried, and they played great tonight.
The Hartford Hawks at Siena College outside Albany, and Siena won that game 54-51. The Whalers entertained Wayne Gretzky and the Los Angeles Kings tonight, and the Whalers got a win at home tonight. And we can show you how some of that came down. We do not have that tape. We do have the tape. Well, perhaps we'll have it in a moment. But at any rate, here we are. All right, the Whalers won this game 4-3. Pat Verbeek breaking a 1-1 tie. The Whalers led it 2-1. Paul Sear would score, and it was a 3-1 lead for the Hartford Whalers. Thomas Sandstrom would score to cut it to 3-2, as it looks like Gretzky gets it here, but it's not. It is Sandstrom. And Govidaris would get his first goal as a Whaler to make it 4-2. The Whalers would win this game by a final score of 4-3, and Mike Adams got reaction after the game.
Part of the irony of tonight's situation is that here at Veterans Memorial Coliseum in downtown Hartford, thousands came to see a hockey game, while thousands of miles away, America's newest veterans were being broken in.
The bombs were going off. Yeah, we were fine.
As the news spread throughout the crowd, there were more and more empty seats in the Coliseum as people flocked to the TV monitors, normally featuring the hockey game.
I feel awful for the people who have husbands and family and everybody over there. I think it's awful that people's lives had to be, forfeited for nothing. Sure.
It's clear that we need to be doing what we're doing. I think he's got the right idea in mind. You can't let this man go any farther than he already has.
Among the crowd were many with friends and relatives in the Persian Gulf.
I'm kind of sad about it, but it's got to be done. My grandson's going over from Okinawa right now. I wrote a letter to him the other day because he knows how much I like hockey. And I said it's going to be hard to watch a hockey game if I know there's going to be a war.
So while the crowd gathered to see the world's greatest hockey player, the world's greatest hockey player himself had the war on his mind.
Well, I got a cousin over there, if we can describe how everybody felt out there with this. Obviously, our minds were probably more concerned about what was going on over there than what was going on this.
Mike Adams, Channel 3 Eyewitness News at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum.
Again, that final score was 4-3. There's a big debate whether the game should continue, football games, what have you. I think they should. Some people need that diversion. Others who don't have to go, don't have to watch, can tune out if they want to.
Of course, the controversy has been raging since the assassination of President Kennedy, when the games went ahead 24 hours later.
Yeah, and the NFL received an awful lot of heat for that, and they have a big question on their hands this weekend and the following with the Super Bowl. Don't know what they're going to do as yet.
Okay.
We'll wait and see. Thanks, Dave. Well, Connecticut senators were split on the measure authorizing war against Iraq, with Senator Christopher Dodd giving the thumbs down to the use of military force, while Senator Joseph Lieberman voted in favor of an attack.
Senator Lieberman is with us now by telephone from his office in Washington, D.C., where he has been monitoring the events of the night. Senator, as I recall, you as a Democrat told the Republican the president that he would get your vote because you felt that down the road Saddam Hussein might be more dangerous than he is now. And the president pretty much quoted that same thought tonight in his address. He quoted a U.S. soldier who said pretty much the same thing. We've got to stop him now. Do you feel justified to some extent?
Absolutely justified. And this is not anything that the president or I or the soldier are making up. You look at the record of Saddam Hussein. If I was back prosecuting cases and I had to put evidence before a jury, there's no question that the evidence is overwhelming to convict him. He's been an aggressor, a tyrant, a killer, and eventually, with all the money he would have gotten from oil over the years, he would have threatened us directly.
Senator, how secure is Israel tonight? We've heard reports that the attack has wiped out the missiles that were directed at Israel. What have you heard?
Well, I haven't really heard much more than that. I think the good news is that none of the neighboring countries appear to have been badly affected, at least on this first night of battle, neither the Israelis nor the Saudis. And that does suggest that the American Air Force may well have demolished the Scud missile sites. But of course, it's early. But the early and partial reports have been extremely encouraging. And I just have a feeling in my gut that the world is already a safer place because of what's happened tonight, including what I believe are probably attacks on Saddam's chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons facilities.
Well, Senator Lieberman, we're told that we're just about out of time. We hope that we can call on you as the campaign continues down the road.
I'll be here, and obviously, like everyone, I hope and pray that our soldiers come out of this well.
Okay, thank you, Senator Joseph Lieberman.
Of course, we want to point out that the continued coverage of the Gulf War is next on CBS, and invite you to stay tuned to Channel 3 throughout the night for updated information and reports from the home front.
Good night.